In this segment of the video series on terrain editing, we're going to go over how to paint materials on our terrain. First, you can see I've added a directional light to our scene. This is just going to highlight our materials a little better. Now, in order to start painting materials, we need to create a material package. Material packages are used to organize materials that are applied to your terrain. So let's first create a new package. I'm going to name my package My Terrain. Now I'm going to choose a location for my package. So now we have a new material package called My Terrain. We now need to add a new material to that package. So create a new material by using the New Material tool. This brings up a dialog that contains the various parameters you need to use to create a new material. Let's first name our material Sand. Note you can put in an optional description. And now let's go over to the Textures tab and choose a base map for our sand. We're going to use a base map that it comes with the terrain demo, which is a sample in the Gamebryo release. So let's browse to our installation folder for Gamebryo, the samples folder and the demos folder, and go to the terrain demo, data, and choose the Sand 2008 D.TGA texture. Now you can see we have a thumbnail of our sand texture. Go ahead and hit apply, and you'll notice our new material was created. Now we need to go over to our terrain editor command panel and make sure that the paint material brush operation or brush element has been added to our list of brush elements. The paint material brush element can be found in your material tab. Make sure you choose your package that you want to use and choose the material, in this case sand, that we just created. Make sure you're in terrain interaction mode by clicking the terrain button. You should see your terrain brush on your terrain, and click anywhere on the terrain. Note, this has applied the sand to the entire terrain. This is because it was the first material that has been applied to the terrain. In order to make sure that the terrain is solid, we've applied the entire material across the terrain. Now it looks a little bad. Notice it's repeating quite heavily. So we want to adjust the repeatability of our material just a little bit. So right-click our sand material and go to Edit Material. Going back to the Textures tab, we can see this tiling scale. Let's go ahead and change that to 32 by 32. That looks a little better. Notice if I zoom really close, you can see the fact that there's a detail map applied to this terrain as well. The detail map was stored in the alpha channel of our base map and is automatically applied to the terrain if it exists. Next, we want to create another material. So either using the New Material button or right-clicking and doing New Material, we can create a new material. Let's name this Rock. Going back to the Textures tab and choosing Base Map, let's select our Rock 2008 D.TGA texture. Again, this texture is in the terrain demo in your Gamebryo installation. Again, hit apply, and we'll see that we have a rock material in our material palette. Go back to the paint material brush and select rock. We can now paint rock on our terrain. We also want to lower our radius a little bit. Now let's go on and start painting some rock on our mountains. Note your materials blend together. Unfortunately, it looks a little bad because again it was repeated. Our rock is repeated quite a bit. So let's go back and edit our rock material. Remember, in our Textures tab, and change that to 16. in both the X and Y or U and V direction. That looks a little better. You can see that better tell that there's rocks there instead of just a repeated pattern. As you'll notice, the rock does have a detail map as well, but the rock isn't very rocky. So to fix that, we're actually going to add a normal map to our rock material. So right-click and do Edit Material on your rock and go back to Textures. We're going to choose a normal map for our terrain, for our rock material. The normal map is rock 2008n.tga. Once we hit Apply, you'll notice that our rock becomes much more detailed and looks much rockier. Our normal map actually also has a parallax map applied to it as well. The height map for the parallax map is stored in the alpha channel. So notice when I apply our rock, we can see much more detail on our rock, as the parallax and normal map provide much more interesting lighting. Next, we're going to create one more material, and we're going to call it moss. Go to your Textures tab, and for Base Map, choose the Moss 2008d.dds texture. In your Paint Material brush element, choose Moss. And let's go and paint some moss. We can also apply a normal map and parallax map to our moss. Right-click and do Edit Material, go to your Textures tab, choose Normal Map, and select the Moss 2008n TGA texture. Notice again we have a lot more detail as the rocks in our little moss texture really seem to pop out of the terrain. If we change rendering modes to wireframe, you can see that the terrain geometry is really not that detailed, but our normal map and parallax map really add to that effect. So that concludes this segment of our video series on painting terrain materials. We've created a material package and added materials to that material package. We've also explored the different texture maps that you can apply to your terrain material, and we've painted several of those on the terrain. Note in this version of Gamebryo, there's actually a limitation such that you can only have 4 materials on your terrain. However, each material can have a base map, a normal map, a detail map, and a parallax map, which, as you can see, gives you lots of detail on your terrain surface.